Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am making a video today in regards to losing my job. Many are not going to know this, but I'm a dog groomer. I'm a professional dog groomer. I was hired in onto a box store. The way I got my education was a contract, did a whole year, and they paid for my schooling, my tools, all that. I've been there 3 years. I was to the point I was doing 5 days a week, doing double booking spots. I did full service, bath brush, all that, had no bather. I provided all my own tools, got my own tools sharpened. I was on a W-2. I was exhausted from it all, so I wanted to do 3 days a week. And I put in a request to do that, and I was granted it. I was approved. I had some vacations coming up. I took my PTO, all that, and I was going to go take my vacation. They come back and they said, my boss specifically, he said, yeah, so we'll put this in, you'll start your new schedule when you come back, and we'll do that. It's like, okay. I come back from vacation. I had access to my stuff, my scheduling app, so I could see, keep an eye on stuff, because I did do double booking, so I tried to make sure that I always have my times and all that good. But yeah, so I checked my app, and the block that I had placed on Wednesdays, they had told me, because I hadn't dropped into my new schedule completely yet, was gone, and days getting filled up and stuff. And I was like, I don't know if this is an accident or what happened, but this can't be happening. If I need to take these 3 days off, I'm gonna get 3 days off in a row. I've got to place these blocks. I've got to drop it at some point. And the idea was that I would be on my fully new schedule, and starting July 1st, right? So I go in, I'm pulled in the office, and basically they told me that higher management auditors didn't like my attitude at the last audit, because I had made comments about how we didn't have enough coverage. It was getting very difficult, especially doing doubles. And then I was pulled aside and told, well, we don't like your attitude. We're not saying this is what's going to make you gone, but you will be gone. It's like, okay, I'll try to do better about my attitude. And they said, oh, and the schedule, by the way, you can't have it. It's not going to happen. We don't have the groomers. Now, mind you, I had been through already. They had hired on one groomer from a transfer. She committed a felony, left, stole a bunch of stuff. It was a big deal. Another one, she'd been there less than me, 6 months, came in. She had been belligerent to me multiple times in front of a manager, and, cussed me out, that kind of thing, been aggressive, didn't help. I would ask for things to help be, done in the salon. I said, hey, I need your help to do this. Ignored me or didn't do it, or would say I was being ugly or nasty or bossy to her or something to that effect, or a bully. And so I talked to my manager, and I was like, hey, I fixed my attitude. Okay, well, the scheduling thing was non-negotiable. I was like, I need these 3 days off. I'm going to my therapy, taking care of my body, all that, but I need these 3 days off. And he was like, well, nothing I can do about it. He's like, or what? And I was like, we'll have to discuss when my last day will be. And he was like, there's no discussion, just put your notice in. I said, okay. I said, well, unfortunately, I had kind of planned for this, accounted for it, because I had made a plan. Like, I had been tired of that salon for a while, and they weren't listening to me, they weren't giving me coverage, they weren't helping me. So I was like, if they don't, I was approved the schedule. We had a plan for it, how to drop in, all that. But it was always in the back of my mind of, especially when I saw those blocks taken off, if they don't approve my new schedule, I will put in my 2 weeks. I can only take so much. So that's what I did. I put my 2 weeks in. It's actually 3 weeks notice, to be exact. I worked the rest of that week, had 2 weeks, and then I worked half of another week. So it's 3 weeks, just about, of notice. So not bad, especially for everything. I was moving dogs, alerting people doing their procedures. Their procedures was you can't tell anyone where you're going. You can't, take people's personal information to poach clients, whatever, yada yada, big box store stuff. Okay, yeah, sure. I didn't have a plan to go anywhere. I didn't have another place to go. I didn't have anything to tell anybody. They're like, where are you going? Nowhere. I don't know. So you'll have to either reach out to me, your own volition, your own selves, or you'll have to call the store and you can get an appointment here. I referred them to a groomer that the groomer that actually cussed me out and got her new schedule working there 6 months, referred her to the, my clients. Is like, she can groom it. You can trust her, just for your job. Just, being fair, being as honest as you can be in that situation, being essentially muzzled, especially as a trades worker with something so personal as dog grooming, one-on-one client basis. And dog grooming, oftentimes you spend a good year building a client base, but I had built that store from scratch, mind you. So 2 years to build what I had built. Third year, super packed, right? And I had done that from the ground up. I built out that store. I built out that salon. That was my hiring contract. I was paid $10 an hour to do construction, basically, because I built that store, shelving, installing, all that. So I put in my 2 weeks and okay. And I was like, I'm going to try to move as many dogs as I can. I said, but there's going to be holes. Because without me working there, they would have gap days. They would have blackout days. There would be no one there. But I was trying to avoid that because if there's no one there, you're going to get dogs groomed. What are you going to do? And they're like, well, let's just wait a couple days and see, what we can do. It's like, okay, just try to make this easy as for everyone. Lots of people had asked me, so what I'd been doing is I had, given out my personal phone number to people. And I was like, you have to reach out to me on your own. That's my personal number. It's tied directly to me. It's not business, anything like that. People ask me, do you have offers anywhere? I was like, a couple places, but I'm not hired on anywhere. So, I don't know anything yet. Worked there 2 days, I think. And today, I was let go. They were saying they accepted my resignation early, which I said, well, isn't that technically termination if my end date was July 1st? And they're like, well, no, because we can accept it early, yada yada. Okay, sure. Where I live, the state I live in, the laws here are very, very poor for workers. So, unfortunately, kind of cut and dry. There's not a lot I can do. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And but then he told me, he said, it's because we had told you were advised that you were, you're poaching clients, and I have a written statement saying that you got hired on a place and that you told the people that you were going to be grooming there. Mind you, I never said that. I had only told people, yeah, a few people have offered me places, but I'm not going anywhere. I don't know. I don't have anywhere to take you. So I'm not hired anywhere. I'm not contracted anywhere. I'm not doing my own thing. Nothing. I'm working for them, fully loyal to them, still grooming dogs, still referring dogs to that salon, yada yada. And it was funny because another groomer with me had been there the same amount of time. We were hired together as a pair to open the salon together. She had opened an LLC business, and she did take and poach, and she even gave her number to the girl who cussed me out, and had her poaching clients, had her telling people's information. She would go behind me on the scheduling app, and she would tell people, I would say, I'm so sorry she's no longer employed with us, you'll have to reach out by your own means, but we can still groom you here, yada yada, whatever. And she would go behind me and she would send him the number. And I texted my boss. I said, so she's giving out the number. What do you want me to do? Because what we had agreed on in a business meeting, a group meeting in the salon in the first place, was you can't give any information. You were not associated. They have to reach out by their own means, yada, yada, yada. You know, very much cut and dry. I was not part of the conversation. He said he would talk about it. I'm assuming it was a one-on-one with that because, you know, I had followed procedure. But, you know, I guess a conversation was had, and, you know, that I guess it stopped. And then that's where we are today. I'm starting my channel on a bit of a sad note, but honestly a spiritually and I think career well-being, healthier note overall. It was time for me to leave that salon. You know, anyone knows about grooming will understand, you know, most big box stores, it's very fast paced, get them in, get them out, do as many as you can, raise business numbers, quotas, all this stuff. And I didn't mind that. Yeah, I've worked in fast pace. I'd worked in food before. I'd built a career in food management. So fast pace wasn't a problem to me as long as you're being safe, you know. But 5 days a week was a lot, being that fast paced, that many dogs. And that was fair, I thought, because everyone else in that salon was 4 days a week. I was the only one 5 days a week at the time. And I'd been working that for 3 years. And mind you, for some of that, I had been working 6 days a week with only 1 day off. And I had to fight for 2 days off. And that was a big deal. So they said, we can't afford to have you 5 days. But I said, but you're willing to get rid of me and not have my income at all, then just let me have 3 days off. They didn't have much to say to that. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what else to say. It's been a very emotional day. I've packed up my whole life's 3 years of my life into storage bins to start over. So now I am starting over all over. I've been wanting to do content creation for a long time, and obviously didn't have the time. Now I do, and I'm very excited to take you on this journey. I'm very excited to have content creation from a side of someone who has been in the public sector for so long, who has worked trades jobs. The stories, you know, I could tell you guys, just especially dealing with a very poor state with very poor laws for safety, for anything, for their workers. I am here to tell you, this is not the first time that I've had to deal with something like that. And mind you, my boss was also a predator on top of all of this. So I had to deal with constant advancements, cat and mouse games, all that. And it was a very buddy, I don't want to say the word all male, but it kind of was, though. Especially in our district, it was just, brothers for brothers. And all these female groomers, and they'd just chew them up, spit them out. It wasn't uncommon, And I'm not the only sad story of a groomer. They had another groomer who was doing great, and she went out on her own to do something, and then didn't quite work out the same. She was eligible for rehire. They rehired her in a pretty poor situation. They wouldn't let her go back to her old salon. So yeah, it was, I'm not the only one. There's tons of stories of people at that box store, groomers specifically, being predator, being predarized, having difficulty with management. People weren't following through. Management was not following through on promises. They were not, updating equipment, systems. They were not being straightforward with people. It wasn't the greatest place to work, but I was a baby groomer. They paid for my schooling. It was a year contract. I worked it out, and I stayed after my contract. I thought, especially with the benefits, they did have not a terrible benefit package. You had to work there for a while to get it, but once you did, it was pretty good. It wasn't the greatest, but it was something, especially in a state where most places don't even offer health insurance or any idea of benefits. It's very much just like, well, work here, handle your own stuff, and then, let us know. In the same. But yeah, we're starting a new journey. We're going to start hopefully doing more content creation, hopefully getting videos out on a schedule. I'm very excited for that. I have a lot of video ideas that I've been working on for a long time and just haven't had the time to film them because they are bigger ideas. So hopefully you guys are very excited to join me on this journey. Hopefully I can keep everyone posted. Hopefully maybe some people will see this who, I did groom your dog or whatever, and you'll recognize me, and, I'm so sorry that I couldn't, either get to give you notice, especially when I was trying to move people to let them know what's going on, and so please, I'm not saying don't trust that store. They are a safe place to get your dog groomed at the end of the day, but, if you loyalty and to your groomer, that kind of thing, if that does matter to you, maybe this message can reach you. But thank you all for watching this and giving me an opportunity to tell my story, and I hope to be able to tell you more stories and hopefully more good news now from now on. But thank you all so much. Have a great day.